Okay, so remember that podcast I told you about? The one with the missing hiker? Yeah, the one that honestly had me totally glued to my headphones like for a solid week. True crime, man. It just like sucks me in. Trying to piece together the puzzle, just like everyone else. But lately I've been thinking a lot about how these stories are told, especially with all the like new shows and documentaries popping up everywhere. And that kind of leads us to today's deep dive. We're looking at that Ryan Murphy series, Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story.
Oh, yeah, that one's definitely gotten people talking.
For sure. Now, you probably already know the kind of the basics of the Menendez case.
Yeah, at least like the broad strokes.
Exactly. Two brothers, wealthy family, accused of, well, a pretty shocking crime. But here's the thing. We're not here to, like, relitigate the entire, 90s media frenzy. Instead, we're diving into this Screen Rant review that's, well, it's causing a bit of a stir.
Oh, how so?
Well, this review isn't just a simple thumbs up or thumbs down. It claims the show is actually, get this, exploitative. And not just a little bit, but in a way that might actually be kind of harmful.
Huh. That's a pretty serious accusation.
Right.
So, like, what's the basis of this claim? What makes the show so exploitative, according to this critic?
Well, for starters, the reviewer says that the show tries to grapple with these complex themes of, like, abuse and manipulation, but it argues that it kind of, like, stumbles along the way.
Okay, I'm listening.
The series, according to this reviewer, can't seem to decide if the brothers are victims or villains.
Interesting. I can see how that could be a problem, especially with a case like this.
It's like, yeah, are they monsters or are they victims? And the show seems to want it both ways.
Right. And this is where I think it gets even trickier. The review points to, like, there's this whole episode, right, dedicated to the parents' backstory.
Okay, yeah, I remember that.
And it's almost as if the show is trying to humanize them,
Mm-hmm.
show their own struggles, maybe even suggest that, hey, maybe they were victims in their own right, too.
That's complicated.
It is. Because on the one hand, to truly get abuse, to untangle it, you have to acknowledge that abusers, a lot of times, they have their own trauma, their own circumstances.
Hurt people, as they say.
Exactly. But then on the other hand, when you present those nuances, but you don't clearly condemn the abuse itself, it's risky, right? You risk minimizing what those kids went through.
So it's a tightrope walk for the filmmakers. Are they going to condemn or are they going to try to explain?
And this review is basically saying that Monsters, it doesn't quite nail that balance.
Huh. Well, I mean, this isn't the first true crime doc to try and tackle something this complex, right? Like, how does it compare to others that have tried?
That's a really good question. And you're right, there are definitely examples out there that have managed to explore these gray areas, but still, they don't let the abuser off the hook,
Yeah, totally.
One that comes to mind is The Jinx. Do you ever see that one?
Ooh, yeah, the Robert Durst story.
That's the one. And it's a wild story. But this series, it does a great job of showing you this guy, Robert Durst. He's deeply troubled, clearly. But it never shies away from the fact that, hey, this guy probably did some really, really bad things.
Okay, so it's possible to do both. You can have the nuance, but still be clear about the wrongdoing.
Right, and I think that's the heart of the Screen Rant critique. Monsters, maybe in trying to be so dramatic, so captivating, maybe it loses some of that nuance, especially when it comes to this whole issue of abuse.
Yeah, and that's a big deal, especially with a case like this that's still, even after all these years, sparks so much debate. So, okay, let me see if I'm following this. We're talking about a show that's tackling this really heavy, complicated case, but it maybe, doesn't quite stick the landing.
Right.
It's kind of all over the place with how it shows the brothers, their parents, the abuse. So, what does that even mean for us watching this stuff? Are we just supposed to turn our brains off when we watch true crime?
That's actually a really crucial point this review brings up. It's so easy to get caught up in the drama of it all, but the Screen Rant piece is a good reminder that we can't just passively consume these stories, especially when they deal with sensitive stuff like abuse. We have a responsibility to be, more critical viewers.
More critical. So not just watching for entertainment, but really thinking about how it's all put together.
Right.
Like, what choices are these filmmakers making, and how do those choices change how we see the case?
Exactly. Because those choices, like the music they use, the editing, even just the way they structure the whole story, it all has an impact. It can literally shape how we view the victims, the perpetrators, and, even how we think about these kinds of cases when we see them play out in the real world.
It's funny you mentioned the music. It just made me think, Have you ever noticed how manipulative the music can be in some of these true crime documentaries? Like, they'll play this super intense, like, scary music, even if it's just a shot of someone walking down the street.
Oh, absolutely. It's like they're trying to make you suspicious of like every single person they show on screen. And that's exactly why it's so important to be aware of those techniques, those little tricks. Ask yourself, is this a real representation of what happened, or are they just trying to make it more entertaining?
This deep dive has really got me thinking. It's a good reminder that true crime can be, well, kind of a double-edged sword, even when it's super fascinating. We have to engage with it thoughtfully, ethically even, wouldn't you say? What would you say is the takeaway for listeners who maybe haven't even seen the show?
I think even if you never watch a single episode of Monsters, the big takeaway here is to be an active participant in, well, everything you watch and listen to. Don't just take everything at face value. Question things, challenge your own assumptions, and be aware of the potential for bias, even manipulation, in how these stories are presented.
It's like we always say, don't check your brain at the door. And that's true, even maybe especially for
Yeah.
true crime.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe by being more discerning viewers, asking tougher questions, we can actually help create a more responsible, more ethical, true crime landscape for everyone.
Absolutely. And on that note, if you want to dive deeper into any of the issues we talked about today, especially that Screen Rant review, it's a really thought-provoking piece. Even if you haven't seen the show, we'll be sure to link to it in our show notes. And hey, who knows? It might just change how you watch true crime from now on.